bhajamaha tadekam jagat sakshi rupam namamaha sadekam nidhanam niralambamisham bhavam bodhipotam sharanyam vrajamaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. On that alone do we meditate. That alone do we worship. To that alone, the witness of the universe, do we bow. To that one who is our sole eternal support, the self-existent Lord, the raft to safety across the ocean of this world, do we come for refuge. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good morning. Good morning. I'm delighted to be visiting in Houston again. And today I'm going to be speaking on the topic from the Himalayan heights to the oceanic depths. It's a kind of, it's two seemingly opposite concepts, the Himalayan heights and the oceanic depths, from the highest point on the Earth's surface to the lowest point on the Earth's surface. These are the geographical references, of course. And what does this have to do with Vedanta and spiritual life? We are actually called to do both. We are called to ascend to the spiritual heights, the spiritual heights represented by the heights of the Himalayas. And we are also called to dive deep, deep, deep into meditation, deep within, into the very depths of our heart. So the sages often speak of the spiritual life, the path, as an ascent, going higher and higher into spiritual experience, the ascent to spiritual union, climbing higher and higher, as it were, beyond this material world, beyond our mundane selves, beyond our bodies and minds, to reach the divine. Like a Himalayan trek, which takes tremendous struggle, step by step by step. At each step we ascend, we leave behind the lower altitudes, and the surroundings change. We leave behind the trees, and then we leave behind the bushes, and then there only rock and ice remains. And when the summit is attained, we are literally on the top of the world. There is no higher place to go. We have reached the summit. So in spiritual life also, we have to leave behind our old selves. And we leave behind we call them lower tendencies, right? The lower tendencies: lust, anger, greed, jealousy, these kinds of tendencies we all have in us, but we consider them lower. They drag our minds outward. They leave us tied to this world. We give them up as we climb on the stairway to the absolute. So finally, we have to leave behind even our minds and our bodies, our minds, ultimately that sense of a separate self, that ego, that me, that has to dissolve as when we attain that summit of spiritual realization. And then we realize that the little me wasn't quite real. It is actually almost like an illusion. And we find the real me which is none other than He, that infinite existence, consciousness, bliss, absolute. So that is one way of understanding the spiritual life. Again, we are asked to dive deep within in meditation to find the divine. Like a deep sea dive, we dive deeper and deeper into the ocean that is the divine, the ocean of the divine. Like perhaps diving into the crystal clear waters of the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, which is the ocean of peace. And we sink down into the water, and we are surrounded on all sides by water. Water above, water below, water before us and behind us, and on all sides of us, this water. We are enveloped in water. It's purifying, it's sanctifying, it's like a baptism. We are fully immersed. We are becoming sanctified and purified and healed. And then perhaps we may find that we are not what we thought we were. Perhaps it is not a physical body that is immersed in the ocean. Perhaps it is actually that we are a salt doll that is immersed in the ocean, like the salt doll in Sri Ramakrishna's parable. And we find that that salt doll is beginning to dissolve into the salt water of the ocean, to melt away, and we become more and more permeated with the water of divinity. And as the last of that salt dissolves, only the infinite ocean remains. The Pacific Ocean is an ocean of salt water. The ocean of existence, the ocean of divinity, is an ocean of consciousness, an infinite divine consciousness. And the Upanishads call that consciousness, that infinite ocean of consciousness, Brahman. The Upanishad has a beautiful verse describing this experience of being surrounded by Brahman. Brahmai Vedam Amritam Purastad Brahma Paschat Brahma Dakshinastaschotarena Adhashchordham cha prasritam Brahmai Vedam Vishwamidam Varishtham. That immortal Brahman alone is before. That Brahman is behind. That Brahman is to the right and to the left. Brahman alone pervades everything, above and below. This universe is that supreme Brahman alone. So Sri Ramakrishna asks us to dive into this divine ocean. Of course, we are already immersed in it, but we are not aware of it. So Sri Ramakrishna asks us, dive within that ocean. We can find that ocean most easily in our heart. And he asks us to dive there. And so many times he gives this illustration in the form of a song. For instance, when Bankim Chandra visited Sri Ramakrishna, the famous Bengali author, there's a kind of notorious or infamous conversation they had together. But afterwards, Bankim became softened, and Sri Ramakrishna gives him some spiritual advice. And he says, let me tell you something. What will you gain by floating on the surface? Dive a little under the water. The gems lie deep under the water. So what is the good of throwing about your arms and legs about on the surface? A real gem is heavy. It doesn't float. It sinks to the bottom. To get the real gem, you must dive deep. And Bankim gives an answer for all of us, actually, a humorous answer. He says, sir, what can we do? We are tied to a cork. It prevents us from diving. And everybody in the room laughs at his joke. And it often feels like that to us, doesn't it? We want to sit in meditation. We want to dive deep. But we're not diving. Something is preventing us from going deep, as if we are on the surface of the ocean and we're trying to dive down, but we're tied to a cork. And if we want to dive deep, we have to untie that cork. We have to let go of that cork so that we can dive deep. Interestingly, Sri Ramakrishna answers him immediately. What does he say? All sins vanish if one only remembers God. His name breaks the fetters of death. You must dive, otherwise you can't get the gem. Interesting. He doesn't say, oh, he let go of the cork. He says, all sins vanish if one only remembers God. Now, in Vedanta, we don't accept the idea of sin, at least not in the Western concept of our nature being sinful, or that we are disobeying God and we have to go to hell for our sins. Nothing like that. Swami Vivekananda reminds us again and again that we are the children of immortal bliss, and it is a sin to call ourselves sinners. Sri Ramakrishna also didn't like that attitude. But we know that we do things which are not in line with our highest ideals sometimes. Sometimes we speak words that are maybe not as respectful as they could be. Perhaps we do something that isn't 100% honest, or maybe we just cheated a little on that tax return, and it's nobody will know, it's all right. Yes, but who knows? We know. And that is tying that cork a little tighter. So Sri Ramakrishna acknowledges this. We do things that are mistakes, and yet those mistakes which tie us to this world, which tie us to our lower nature, which create tendencies in us which don't like to dive deep into the ocean of the divine, those are dispelled simply by remembering the divine, through the repetition of the name of the divine, the holy name. His name breaks the fetters of death. The fetters of death that tie us to this world, that tie us to the cork. The name of God itself breaks those ties. And then Sri Ramakrishna sings that song, that famous song. It's a Baul song. Duba 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 rup shagore amar mon. Ore duba 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 rup shagore amar mon. Tola tola patal kunjale, tola tola patal kunjale. Pabire prema ratna dhan, pabire prema ratna dhan. Duba 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 rup shagore amar mon. Bengali song, dive. Dub means dive. Dive, 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 oh my mind, dive. Where? Dive. In the Rup Shagor, in that ocean of infinite beauty, which is the divine. Dive, 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 oh my mind, into that ocean of beauty. And if you can go, oh my mind, if you can sink to the very depth, you will get the gem. What is that gem? That gem is the most precious thing we can find in life. That gem is the gem of prema, of divine love. That love which knows no distinction, that all-encompassing, overpowering love for the divine, which is of the very nature of bliss and overflows to embrace everyone and everything. So that cork, our attachments, our aversions, our fears, our hang-ups, our inability to let go, the so-called sins, we have to cut that tie that ties us to the cork, taking the sword of the name of God and dive deep. So here we have the two contrasting, as it seems, contrasting analogies for spiritual life: the ascent and the dive. There's one way to look on this, is to envision the ascent as the Himalayas, of course, represent the ascent, the struggle for purity, the struggle to transcend, the struggle to attain illumination. We have to struggle. We have to try. We have to put our whole effort into spiritual life. It's a struggle to lift the mind from the mundane to the divine. This represents, in a sense, the path of jnana, the path of wisdom. And the ocean represents depth, immersion in the divine, complete surrender as we sink deeper and deeper, finding the unfathomable heart of being deep within our own hearts. It is the dive into the source of creation. It is the path of bhakti. They seem to be different. but are they perhaps rather complementary? Perhaps only by diving deep we can ascend. And perhaps only by struggling to ascend can we make that dive. Perhaps they meet not in the external geography of the mountains and the ocean, but they meet in the internal geography of our own hearts, in the cave of our hearts. The topic today, which I selected today, it was actually suggested to me by my recent pilgrimage to India, because I had the opportunity to climb, to ascend in the Himalayas, to a couple of famous Shiva shrines to Lord Shiva high in the Himalayas. And I also had the chance to not dive that deep, but to dip, at least, into the holy Ganga, the Mother Ganga. And so the pilgrimage itself was a divine immersion of sorts, a kind of plunging into the divine in India, because there is something special about India, even though it is there's a lot of chaos. It seems like sometimes there's an overpopulation. There's a lot of dirt. There's a lot of noise. All these things, and yet it is the holy land. It is the land of sacred geography. The whole land is covered with sacred shrines, of places of pilgrimage, holy rivers, holy mountains. And that sanctity of the land is also experienced by the people of India. Most of the people seem to be somehow reflecting that sanctity in their own lives, this tremendous faith that we see in the people of India for the divine, for the possibility of attaining the divine. And that faith, when we visit India, we're carried into that river of faith that is flowing so strongly there. It flows everywhere. Of course, it flows here also. But there, perhaps, at least for this pilgrim, it is more palpable. So I will share a couple of highlights of that pilgrimage to see how it reflects on our topic. And I had the chance to visit Haridwar or Haridwar, an ancient place of pilgrimage, an ancient tirtha. Tirtha is, of course, a place of water. And Haridwar is definitely a place of water. The Ganga is flowing right there. And at these tirthas, we find a fascinating nexus, a sort of a coming together of different streams of faith, a nexus of faith and history and mythology and scripture and tradition. So all these different streams meet at these places. According to the legend, it was at Haridwar that the Ganga, the Mother Ganga, descended when Shiva released the mighty river from the locks of his hair. And, of course, the Ganga came down. Why? Due to the tremendous tapas of King Bhagiratha, who wanted to bring Ganga down to purify his ancestors who had died in an inauspicious way. And so Ganga is also called Bhagirathi. She is the holiest of holy rivers. It is she who grants liberation. She cleanses us of all our mistakes, all the wrong things we did, not only in this life, but in all our previous lives. She washes them all away. And in Haridwar, it's particularly easy to feel that because her water is also very clean and pure. That's before all the factories on her banks have poured various things into the water. So, and Haridwar itself is the gate to the Himalayas. Dwara, of course, it means a doorway or a gateway. And Hari, the Lord, the gateway to the Lord. Vishnu, Hari. But half the time we write and pronounce the town as Haridwar because it is also the gate to Hara, Lord Shiva. It is the gate to the infinite. So this is the Haridwar. Now the famous incident of the churning of the ocean, the mythological, shall we say, the mythological incident. The mythology, it doesn't necessarily have a historical reality, but it has its own reality. And though we know that, well, historically we can't say that, okay, the Devas and the Asuras got together to churn the ocean, but we somehow feel that there's a truth to it all the same. And they came together to churn the ocean of milk, to get all the gems and the amrita at the bottom. But as they started churning, first what came up was a terrible poison that was going to destroy the whole world. So Shiva, in his tremendous compassion and mercy, took that poison and drank it and kept it right here in his throat. So he is now the blue-throated one. And then finally that nectar of immortality, the amrita, came out in a kalasha, a special pot of nectar. And then, of course, the Devas want to take it and not let the Asuras have it. And the Asuras want it and to not let the Devas have it. And so they fight over it. And in that course of that fighting and stealing it away, and either while the Asuras were carrying it away or while Garuda was carrying it away, depending on which of the versions of the story you are reading, 4 drops of that nectar fell to earth, creating that sacred geography. And one of those drops spilled at Haridwar, fell at Haridwar. And one, of course, at Prayagraj, Allahabad, one at Ujjain, and one at Nashik. Hence, out of that kumbha, 4 drops of nectar fell. So we have every 12 years the Kumbha Mela at one of these 4 holy places. So this is where that drop fell in Haridwar, is the Brahma Kunda. They call it the Brahma Kunda. It's a certain part of the river which is considered that spot. That's the best spot to have your holy dip in Mother Ganga. And of course, history is also, in our own history of our own spiritual lineage, also is connected with this place, because Holy Mother, Sri Sarada Devi, she visited the Brahma Kunda. And what did she bring there? She brought some sacred relics of Sri Ramakrishna's body, some fingernails and some hair. And as she was holding it in her hand and entering the water, and she was going to immerse it in the water, she describes how it seemed as if Mother Ganga herself, sending a wave, eagerly took those relics and embraced them and took them out of her hands into her own waters, thus sanctifying the waters of the Ganga all the more. And when we go to Mother Ganga for a dip, we go to become purified. When great souls like Holy Mother go to the Ganga for a dip, she goes to add to the sanctity of the river. So that's why the great saints go to places of pilgrimage, also to add to the sanctity. Partly, yes, to enjoy the divine play in these holy places, but also to contribute to their sanctity. And actually, we too, when we visit a place of pilgrimage, or even when we visit a temple, it is not enough for us simply to receive the blessings, to take. We are not only to take, we are also to give. That means we also should contribute to the sanctity of the place by doing a little japa, doing a little meditation, offering some prayers, not just prayers for ourselves, but prayers for the whole world, prayers for all beings, that all beings may be lifted out of misery and suffering and attain to the divine. So that is our responsibility when we visit a holy place, not just to take, but also to give. So, it was the Mahalaya Day, one of the very holy days in the Hindu calendar, because India is not only a land of sacred geography, but her calendar is also a calendar of holy days, and almost every day is a holy day. But the Mahalaya Day is one of the holier of the holy days, and we were going for a dip. One of my Brahmacharan brothers and I, we went to the Brahma Kunda for a dip. And as we're coming closer and closer, we're finding more and more people, and the crowd is getting more and more dense. And I'm amazed to see the crowds. And I tell him, my God, so many people. And he says, this is nothing, Maharaj. This is not crowded at all. It was crowded, but not, he has seen the Kumbh Mela. So he knows that compared to Kumbh Mela, it wasn't crowded. But still, there were not hundreds, there were thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of people gathered at the Ganga to have a holy dip on this day. And we are lifted up without realizing it, the presence of so many faithful, so many people with sincere faith and earnestness who are coming for a dip in the Ganga. Why? Why are they coming? They want to be purified. They want to get closer to God. They want to find God. They want to have the assurance that they will attain the divine. And it's beautiful to see how that faith manifests. I saw some village women who are preparing their puja. They're doing puja. In the midst of all the pandemonium, there's on this side, there's priests chanting mantras. On that side, there's some people singing some chants. There's people making their dip. Over there's some kids having fun and splashing each other. And then there's these women who are preparing their puja, and they're making the incense itself. They have some ingredients, and they're rolling it into incense, and then they're lighting it and putting it on a little basket that will be set afloat on the Mother Ganga. So this whole mood is tremendous. And the two of us somehow find a spot where there's a little passage down to the water. And so I go first, and my brother holds my clothes. I wear a little towel to enter the water. And I had also brought with me the ashes, shall we say, of one of our brother monks. Swami Shiva, he was known as, Swami Atmatattvananda. He died about 5 years ago or so. And his body, of course, was cremated. And those ashes, as we call them, they're actually not technically ashes, but the last bit of bone that didn't burn, most of them were immersed in the Pacific Ocean at the time of our Kali immersion. But we saved just a few for Mahayogananda. And so I had brought that with me also in a Ziploc bag. We have to be practical. So I was also carrying that Ziploc bag as I was going down into the Ganga. And I entered the waters. It wasn't too cold. And first, we chanted all the holy mantras we could think of at the time, all the Shanti mantras and the Pranam mantras and all of that, creating our own mood of sanctity and dedication. And then I entered the water, and it was an experience of living. Water is living. It's a flowing river. And before I knew it, I was being carried downstream, and I had to swim back. But anyhow, I immersed those last ashes into the water, not the bag though. I saved the bag, and we don't want to pollute Mother Ganga, and had this sense of remembering our brother, who was, of course, initiated in our tradition and was a monk, and so I had no concerns for his spiritual well-being. Still, this was a kind of remembrance of him and a consecration of his remains to the holy waters of the Ganga in a very holy spot on a very holy day. And I also felt a tremendous feeling of purity, of renewal, of holiness. And I came out of the water, and then I held my brother's clothes while he went in for his dip, and then we came back to the ashrama. So this was a beautiful experience of immersion. As in spiritual life, we are called to dive within. We also dove in externally into the Ganga, as it were, dipped into the Ganga, and felt connected through this, because it's such a nexus of history and mythology and faith and all of that. So we dive into that whole nexus, and we feel connected to all those incidents related about Mother Ganga. So so India is this land of sacred geography, as I've been suggesting, and we have not only the tirthas, the holy rivers, we also have the Shakti Pithas, the shrines dedicated to the Divine Mother, where parts of the body of Sati fell when Shiva was on his mad dance of destruction after she died because her father insulted him, and etc. All these wonderful myths which manifest as sacred geography. And then there are the Jyotirlingas, the Shiva, the 12 emblems of Shiva, which are said to be eternal, and where Shiva takes the form of an infinite column of light, an infinite pillar of light, with of which one cannot find either the top or the bottom. Even Brahma and Vishnu could not find the extent of that pillar. It's an infinite pillar of light. And so this is a beautiful tradition of India. And we have lost it in this country, but it was here. The native peoples who were here before Europeans came, they understood this sacred geography. And still, there is some knowledge, at least among the native people here, of those especially holy places and holy mountains and places where our spiritual practice somehow seems to bear fruit in a different way, where we feel something more holy. So one of these Jyotirlingas is high in the Himalayas. It's called the Kedarnath, a great temple at about 12,000 feet, also steeped in this tradition of tradition and history and mythology and scripture. So many scriptural references also. One of the Jyotirlingas, the Pandavas, Arjuna and his brother, are said to have built this temple and to have done intense spiritual practice, intense tapas there. Why? To enter Svargaloka, to enter heaven. And Shankaracharya is also said to have left his body here at Kedarnath. And it is also a source of Mandakini River, which is one of the tributaries, one of the feeders of Mahayogananda. So the Mahayogananda actually begins from, I think it's Rudraprayag, isn't it? Where the different tributaries form, and then from Rudraprayag we call her Mahayogananda. And the Prayag means the place where two rivers come together. So I had the tremendous good fortune to make the pilgrimage to Kedarnath this time. And I have to say, it's a pretty long and grueling trek. A stone path, sort of coarsely paved with stones, up and up and up for 16 kilometers, 9 miles of really grueling walking, and carrying one's luggage also, because I was going to spend the night there, so I needed some warm clothes because it's pretty cold at night, at least up there. And with thousands of other pilgrims, we're all walking up this mountain or riding horses. But riding horse is not easy. Not that, oh, I'll ride a horse, that'll be easy. It's also got its own challenges. And when you reach the top, you can hardly walk from what they called the saddle sore. No, you're and so it's not so easy as it sounds. And there's the danger of falling off the horse. I saw someone fall off the horse. So it's also not, and they also make the trek all the more challenging because these chains of horses come walking by, and you have to be careful or they'll push you off the path. So I had a staff, and I would knock the staff on the ground when the horses are coming, so they would at least not run into me. They would be a little bit out of the way. But what are we all doing? We're all chanting the holy name of Shiva, because we have this sense we are going, what? We are going to meet the Lord. We are going to touch God. So we're making this pilgrimage, and all are chanting Shiva's name. And the trek itself is like an immersion into the divine. As we ascend, we're also diving deep, because actually, to be honest, the only way I could make that trek, that grueling trek, where the oxygen is thin and every step is painful, is to chant the mantra at every step. And that way, somehow, this body was able to climb up to the Kedarnath. And gradually, the mantra permeates everything, permeates the mind, permeates the body, permeates the path, so that the path is divine, the pilgrim is divine, the other pilgrims are divine, and we're all going towards the divine. It's a feeling also of tremendous communion with the other pilgrims who are walking, and with joyous cries as we meet each other of Jai Bholanath or Hara Hara Mahadev, Om Namah Shivaya. We're all greeting each other with the holy name of Shiva. And finally, of course, we do reach the holy temple. And a tremendous feeling of attainment comes, that I have reached that goal which I was struggling for 7 hours, and actually for many years, because for many years I cherished the desire to visit Kedarnath. So this tremendous feeling of attaining that goal which we were seeking. And of course, the joy of offering our worship inside the sanctum. And at Kedarnath, the pilgrims are allowed to touch the emblem. It's surely a natural rock formation that was there since how many millennia, and then the temple was built up around it. And we touch the holy form of Shiva and feel that we are touching God himself. And afterwards, we realize that as important as reaching the temple, or perhaps even more important than reaching the temple, was the journey. That the journey, the struggle itself was the most important, because it was through that struggle, that we become purified, through chanting the name, through thinking of the goal as we are trudging up and up and up, we become purified, we become prepared to meet our Maker in a remote temple high in the Himalayas. There's also the tremendous natural beauty at these Himalayan heights. And it's not actually beauty. The words fail to capture the majesty, the glory, the inexpressible, I don't know what to call it, of the high Himalayan peaks. And it is as if we are face to face with the divine. The Himalayas represent the divinity manifest. They're infinitely large, as infinite as any one thing can be in this world. There are two infinite things, as it were, the ocean and the Himalaya. If you haven't seen them in person, you can't understand it. One has to see them in person to understand the immensity, because the photographs doesn't do it. I've seen mountains. You can say I've seen the snow peaks of the Rockies or the snow peaks of the Alps. Yes, they are reminiscent of the Himalayas. But when you meet the Himalayas, you realize that it's of an entirely different order of magnitude. And why, I wonder, when we gaze at those peaks, why do our eyes not tire of looking at them? I had the good fortune to live for 2 years in Mayavati, which is an ashrama established by Swami Vivekananda, the Advaita ashrama, also in the Himalayas, about not quite 7,000 feet. And there's this tremendous view about 4 or 5 months of the year. It will be there pretty much every day. And you have this view of hundreds of miles worth of the snow peaks of the Himalayas, including Nanda Devi and Trishul, all these holy peaks. And though I was there for 2 years, I never got tired of looking at them, never got tired of gazing at them. And I wonder why that is. And I think it is because seeing those peaks reminds us of the glory of our own self, the glory of our own soul. As Swami Vivekananda says, stand on the glory of your own soul, stand on the glory of the self. And seeing the glory, the majesty of these peaks reminds us somehow, even though we may not realize it, reminds us of the glory of who we really are. Infinite consciousness and bliss. How amazing. So as Swami Vivekananda would say, when we see something beautiful, it is actually we who bring that beauty to it. We make the Himalayas beautiful. It is because that beauty is within. When he was sailing in the Mediterranean with the Sister Nivedita, and they were passing by the island of Messina, and the sun was setting, and the last rays of the sun were kissing the peak of the island, and Mount Vesuvius nearby was in mild eruption, so there was a little smoke or steam coming off the volcano, and it was so breathtakingly beautiful. And then Swamiji tells Sister Nivedita, Messina must thank me. It is I who give her all her beauty. So this is the external versus the internal geography. We have within us also a sacred geography of sorts. On the one hand, the yogis tell us that there are these centers of consciousness found within the body, in the subtle body, called chakras. And there are 7 of them. And the nadis, the nerve channels, there's a nerve channel called the Sushumna passing through the spine. This is like a holy river, the holy river Ganga, the internal Ganga flowing in the Sushumna. And then there's the 2 nadis, the Ira and Pingala. So we have these 3 sacred rivers flowing within us. And the Himalayan ascent, which we are to do, is to bring our mind up from the lower centers to the higher centers and finally attain the summit, which is at the Sahasrara in the brain. And the oceanic dive of our inner sacred geography occurs in the heart, because it is there that it is said this ocean of consciousness is found. And as we descend deep into the heart, into the cave, the heart is also likened to a cave, a holy cave. And we descend into that cave and we find there that infinite ocean, and we dive into it and dive deep, deep within, finding the divine. So Sri Ramakrishna gives some descriptions of this sacred geography, these centers within. And he tells us that for so-called worldly people who are not interested in spiritual life, they're immersed in their sense life, in the life of enjoyment and seeking after power and money and all these things. He says the mind of such people generally moves among the 3 lower centers. Those centers at the navel, the organ of generation, the organ of evacuation. And then he says, after great effort and spiritual practice, the Kundalini is awakened, that power that lies at the base of the spine, that Kundalini Shakti, that power which is our power of spiritual realization. And he describes these lotuses, these chakras, and when the Kundalini awakens, the Kundalini passes through these lower centers and comes to the heart. And then the heart bursts open like a lotus which bursts into blossom. And Sri Ramakrishna says, one then feels the awakening of divine consciousness and sees light. One sees light. And what happens then? In mute wonder, we see that light. And he describes how the aspirant cries out, what is this? What is this? No words can express the joy of experiencing the divine directly within our own hearts. So then Sri Ramakrishna goes on to describe, after the heart center, there's the center in the throat. And when the mind reaches this center, the devotee longs to talk and hear only about God. And any conversation on other topics is actually painful. And the person will leave such a place. There's the 6th center, which is found between the eyebrows. And when the mind reaches this center, according to Sri Ramakrishna, we see the form of the divine. We see the form of God. But there's still a slight barrier, and he likens it to seeing the light in a lantern. The glass of the lantern prevents us from touching the light. And then finally, the 1,000-petaled lotus, the Sahasrara chakra, which is found at the top of the head. And when the Kundalini arrives there, the seeker enters samadhi, complete absorption in the divine. In that lotus, he says, dwells the Satchidananda Shiva, the Absolute. And there the Kundalini, the awakened power, unites with Shiva. This is known as the union of Shiva and Shakti. So this is our inner sacred geography. It strikes me that in the external geography we have this beautiful circle, as it were. The ice and snow of the Himalayan peaks melt under the warmth of the sun, and those waters flow down and down, bringing blessings to all humanity in the form of Mother Ganga, who not only purifies all who come to her, but she also feeds much of India, because it is her waters which irrigate the lands, growing the food along her banks. And as she empties into the ocean, finally, at the Ganga Sagar, her waters mingle with the infinite ocean, surely reaching even to the very depths of the ocean. So when we enter the ocean, we also can feel we are touching Mother Ganga and all the other sacred rivers of all over the world. And then the ocean's waters, again under the heat of the sun, they begin to evaporate. And those water molecules rise and rise and rise and gather into clouds. And those clouds, some of them at least, surely waft over the Himalayan peaks and kiss the peaks of the Himalayas. And then they fall down in the form of snow, which again settles on those peaks, rendering them so beautiful and pure. And so thus the circle is completed, as the snow melts and flows to the Ganga and flows to the ocean, and then again rises into the atmosphere and forms the clouds, which again fall down in snow on the holy peaks. So we too, in our spiritual life, we strive both to ascend to the heights of illumination and to the depths of our inner being, uniting the two directions, upward and inward, till we find the divine, both within and without, shining in the hearts of all beings. So I hope I wanted to share a little bit of my experience of pilgrimage, and to see how actually it's very relevant to our spiritual life. We are to struggle in spiritual life, to climb higher, to leave behind all the excess weight that's holding us back, and ascend to the heights of spiritual experience. And at the same time, we're also called to dive deep within, cutting the fetters that tie us to that cork of all our unhelpful mental tendencies, so that we can dive deep within and find the divine shining deep within us. May we attain to that experience of the divine in this life itself. It is not simply, as Swami Oceanic used to say, not simply a post-mortem emancipation that Vedantists seek. We are seeking emancipation in this life itself. And yes, it is possible. We can realize, we can touch the divine. We are always touching the divine. We simply have to open our eyes and see. Thank you very much. We'll have the Arati now. Okay, that's on a different topic altogether. There's how many statues of Shiva there are in all over India, upstream, downstream, upstream, to the left, to the right, to the north, to the south. We have to find that Shiva within. Ultimately, that's where we find Shiva. We go to make the pilgrimage to Shiva without, and then we also find that Shiva within. One of the important practices of pilgrimage, it's not enough to make a pilgrimage, a holy pilgrimage once in your life. You go and, okay, I've done that, now I've done it, I'm done. My my salvation is assured. No. Sri Ramakrishna says, the cows, when they eat grass, they eat it and swallow it immediately. And it sits in one's stomach. But it's not yet ready to be digested. In the evening, the cows come back and lie down oftentimes, and then they bring that grass back up and they chew it more. That's called chewing the cud. So they bring that grass back up and they chew it and they chew it. So you'll see the cows in the evening, they're chewing. They're not eating anything. They're chewing what they already ate to render it more digestible. So Sri Ramakrishna says that we also have to do when we go on a pilgrimage. A pilgrimage, how long does it last? Maybe a day, maybe a few days, maybe a week. We gather so many experiences and we put them inside. But don't forget them. We don't swallow them completely. We don't digest them and all that. We bring them back up and chew the cud. We remember that experience. We think it over. And that deepens the benefit of the pilgrimage. That enhances our spiritual progress when we do that, when we remember that pilgrimage. Because the pilgrimage, ideally, was a period when we attained to some spiritual elevation. We felt something. Not only did we perhaps attain some physical elevation, but we attained some spiritual elevation. So when we remember that, again, we touch that elevated state of mind and try to become more established in it, so that most of the time, even all the time, we remain in an elevated spiritual mood. That is a wonderful practice in spiritual life, to chew the cud of our pilgrimage. So Sri Ramakrishna would say, go forward. You don't have to calculate all these different little details. Go forward. Chant the name. You have received the mantra. Chant the name. Go on chanting the name with intensity and devotion and longing. Everything will unfold of itself. What the different stages are, all those things, not to worry. It will happen of itself. You don't have to think too much about them. Your experience will be unique to you. And everyone's experience is unique. So that will be my suggestion. So now we'll have Arati. Is someone here to, Simantima is going to lead us, I think, in the singing, and I will wave the lights. Usually we close the talk with a chant, no? Short chant. Om asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityor ma mritangamaya avirma edhi rudrayate dakshinam mukham tena mam pahi nityam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. From the unreal, lead us to the real. From darkness, lead us unto light. From death, lead us to immortality. Reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. Om, peace, peace.